So he is surprised at the vote. So he thought more people hated him than did. Do you think he's guilty? I mean, of course, officially, they say yes, he's guilty. But it seems hard to believe, considering the power of his arguments. But of course, this is Plato writing. And you wonder, well, is that really the way the court went? But we do have others that also give us another version of the apology, and they're almost exactly the same. So that seems like you get two reporters reporting on the same trial, and it seems remarkably the same. Seems like that was pretty honest. And so the apology is considered to be one of the first third of the dialogues, the ones where Socrates is really depicted the way Socrates was. Pain in the butt that asked people questions that they couldn't answer. It just made them look foolish, which was a bad thing to do. These were powerful people. Imagine how Donald Trump would feel if you made him look foolish. Probably wouldn't notice it. Probably wouldn't notice it. He does his own job at that. Right? Why are we importing all these people from, well, let's not say where they're coming from.
You consider some of the conditions some of those people live in?
I've
It
heard,
was
yeah.
but the way he came across publicly and politically was not so good. Kind of like Socrates.
I don't think he cares. I think he just says what's on his mind.
You know, he's what, 70?
Why would he care? Got him elected president.
Right.
Based on that kind of
Exactly. Yeah, I think his rating went up when he said that, because all across the country, people were like, yeah.
Didn't he insult Oprah lately? Not really, but kind of. He said he'd beat Oprah if she ran for president. Just things like that.
Oprah.
She said
She could act as a good president, but handling all the
she was
stress.
like, I'm not qualified.
Well, back to Socrates.
Please learn your lesson.
Back to Socrates. That's fun though, isn't it? Talking about all that. So today we would certainly say, oh no, that's what a good teacher's supposed to be. Although of course a lot of folks will turn around and say, no, we don't really want teachers doing that kind of thing. Gosh, you know, if you were basically a rabble rouser at Chugiak High School, encouraging the kids to think for themselves instead of, right, ooh. And if you're, happened to me actually.
I remember you saying
It was fun. Feather in my cap. Hey, I got kicked out of Chugiak High School. Talking about, of all things, of mice and men. The novel. But yeah, you have to be careful, even today. And yet at the same time, we do think of Socrates as like the patron saint. That's a joke, because obviously it's pre-Christian. He dies in 399 BC. I actually had one student say, boy, you know, the things he said, didn't that get him in trouble with the church? No, not yet. 399 BC, what does that stand for? I've also had students that were absolutely convinced that the King James Version translation, King James translation of the Bible was the original. So, they run
1700s.
yeah, Elizabethan James. Elizabeth actually started it, I think, and James the first was the one that, so Shakespeare. I mean, English wasn't a language at the time. sure it is a language, actually. This is one of my favorite things. But, so, today we think of him as the patron saint of critical thinking. Although, we might say Crito ought to be, since actually Crito means critical. Socrates, you look it up, so is like all, and krates is where we get the root for power, like democrat, aristocracy, right? So power, so all the power, so how do you interpret that? Plato I talked about being Plate, but his name was supposed to be Aristocles, so the glory of the best. So that's kind of interesting. But so they find him guilty. He pleads his case and says, okay, well, he gets to name his punishment, and he says, well, basically a great retirement at government expense. That would be a great punishment. And that's, oh, that won't work. No, okay, well, so pay a fee of some sort. And, well, obviously that doesn't go over. So the death by hemlock, which he knew was poison. He knew that was poison. But it's kind of interesting because the next shall I keep moving on here?
Really quick, in the apology, was he sentenced to death before or after he basically kind of insulted them?
After.
Okay.
Well, but he insults them at every stage of the way too. I mean,
But
so
there's literally like one point where he basically says, if like by killing me, what you're doing is actually harming yourself. So
right. That's
little-
after. That's after
Okay.
he gets the punishment. Not after he gets killed, obviously, because he didn't say anything after that, as far as I know. Yeah, but that's a famous line too, because you can't really hurt me. You can't really hurt me. What does he mean by that? Is he assuming he has a soul, and that that the death of the body is not really the death of him? That his intelligence is somehow going on. Good question. But the Crito, any other? Is that good? Did I answer that? They break at a certain point. Kind of like recess. They have the vote. He comes back. No, he finds out he's guilty, but then they decide what the punishment is going to be. But the Crito, which is, you look up Crito means, it's the root word for our critical. We say critical. And in this one, it's odd. Crito has come to the jail, which, by the way, it's another tourist site. You could go and see where Socrates' jail cell was. So you can actually go and see the place. And you can see the Greeks really take care of these special sites really, really well.
Iceland, I think, is aiming to start renovating like the Acropolis and stuff.
Yeah, Iceland and Norway have a grant, so if you go to Athens, the Acropolis, they're currently rebuilding it, but using as many of the original pieces as possible.
Is that going to get the Elgin sculptures? I know Britain.
They were about a year or two into it when we were there in 2013. I'm not sure where it's at now.
Because Britain will not give them up. They're going to, the Elgin marbles, they're going to keep them. It's like one of the main rooms in the British Museum, right? As you go in, all the stuff, because they cut them in half, the frieze, took them in pieces and shipped them. And of course, as far as England's concerned, they saved them, because had they been left there, they would have been in the same shape as the Acropolis itself. But it's kind of interesting here. Are you familiar with the one in Nashville or Athens, Tennessee?
I know of it.
Because I misspelled it. But this is my favorite picture of it. Yeah, you can. There's a copy, including if you get inside, there's a statue of Athena, which looks absolutely incredible. I've seen it. I'm not sure how you get into to see the statue inside, but it's all beautiful.
There's a link in there on the left,
There's a link on the left.
under the person on that's black.
This one?
Yeah, maybe.
So you get to see the face. There she is. So that's based on what they know about the original. It's supposed to be a good copy. So I guess if you want to see what it probably really looked like, Tennessee is much easier to get to. And, you know, they've got McDonald's there. So.
Well, they have that in Greece too.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, that's everywhere. Can't escape that.
Well, I'm really a fan of Thomas Friedman's Golden Arches theory, which is that no two countries that have McDonald's in them will go to war with one another. You familiar with that?
I don't think that's.
I don't know.
I don't know, when was McDonald's?
Seven-
We've been to war with it.
Yeah, I mean, at least at the time that he came up with that theory, I think it was correct. I think it still is, but I'm not sure. So that's interesting. But so Crito comes to the jail where Socrates is, which, so, what happened to it? I lost it. Oh, there it goes. So he comes to the jail. And tells Socrates, okay, it's all set. We've bribed all the guards. Everybody's all excited, looking for, I think it's Thebes, wherever he's going to go. So they're going to get him out. They're going to leave town, take him away. They've already, you know, and it's you know, from what I've read about it, this is actually more the tradition. They don't really kill that many people. Just because you're found guilty, you pay off whoever and leave town. So it really turns out to be an ostracism as opposed to a death. Right? And they are waiting, and the reason they're waiting is because the tradition was to wait for the gods to approve any death that the community had decided on, and you had to wait for the ship to go to wherever the temple was where they would get approval for the death, and then when the ship comes back, then you could do it. Well, so before the ship gets back, we're all set, you know, come. And Socrates surprises Crito by pointing out, I'm not going. And here's his argument, right? Athens is my mother. And he says he has never left her except for at war. So he's never traveled. But Athens is my mother. I disagree with the verdict, but I have to follow what the verdict is, right? I have to follow it. My obligation is to, so this introduces, of course, the whole kinds of arguments like, so maybe you didn't vote for Trump, maybe, right? Or a law, like this seatbelt law. You know, I have a philosopher friend who, you know, never wears a seatbelt. You know, and you know, we pass the law. You know, even if you disagree, you know, with wearing a seatbelt, because he feels like if he's in an accident, the seatbelt would be more dangerous to him than not. Yeah, that's, you know, and of course, this is one of those philosophers, and I'm talking about you. You know who? Because he knows who. that he's used LSD, LDS?
LSD.
LSD. Sorry, get those mixed up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He used that when he was younger and thought it was really quite impressive. You know, it opened his mind to all sorts of things. I think, probably. But so anyway, he's argues that, you know, I'd be trapped, and so I need to get out. And the seatbelt could be more dangerous than not. But we vote for it even if you disagree, you know, because, right, that's how democracy works. So majority, or the electoral college, maybe not the majority, voted, you know, this is the guy who's president. He's our president. So he orders us to do stuff. We're obligated to do it if it's a legal order, right? And, you know, you can still voice your disagreement and all that. You have the right to do all that. But strictly speaking, if, say, I was in the military and the president ordered us into North Korea or something, as long as the Congress was happy with that, you know, et cetera, off we go, right? I'm not going to say, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. Not up to me, right? And that's basically what Socrates is arguing here. This is what Athens has decided, and my duty is to do what Athens has decided, not to flee. Plus, added issue, if I were in Thebes or wherever you'd be going, and we were arguing like we do, because that's what everybody is looking for. We're looking forward to having dinner with you there, you know, and we'll all have our arguments and everything. Well, you know, if one of the arguments is doing what your duty requires of you, and you'll be able to turn around and say, but Socrates, you yourself were obligated to suffer the punishment, and you fled, so you don't do what you say. So I won't be able to have any good arguments anymore. So there's two interesting reasons why he refuses to be released because of that. So that's kind of interesting. Quite a pretty short one. But now, still in prison, we get the Phaedo. So now this one's even more important. Very important, really. Maybe central to our Western culture. This is because of the nature of the soul. This is also the death of Socrates. So this is where the Steve Martin skit kind of picks up, is in the Phaedo. This is where it starts off with his wife and kids there, and they're all in tears, and that's annoying. So they leave, and then it's all the friends, and they have this discussion. And while they're discussing the soul, and of course that's when the cup comes and he drinks the cup, and the death of Socrates, right? And he doesn't, you know, at the end say to, it's not Plato, but he doesn't, his last words aren't, daylight's come and me want to go home. He doesn't do that, right? His last line is, remember to pay Asclepius a cock for my cure. So he wants to pay the doctor for his cure of a disease, and you know, we've tried to, okay, so what disease is he talking about? The disease of living, right? He's being cured because he's being killed, so he's no longer going to suffer this disease of being immortal anymore. You know, kind of interesting. But so the focus here is on the soul, and we get a really interesting argument. It starts off by saying that the soul has no parts. So, has no parts because it's not a physical thing. Now, of course, we can argue today, a lot of folks would. I mean, I'm thinking Pinker, Stephen Pinker, lots of books. You think about Steven Pinker. Is it PH? No, B. So Steven Pinker. Look at, he's got really good hair. This picture doesn't do him justice. He's often got it lots longer. And by the way, his wife is also an author and quite interesting on her own. So and they've been in a couple discussions together on like the stage, etc. But we get to his books. So some of the books he's written: Language Instinct, How the Mind Works, Words and Rules, The Blank Slate, The Stuff of Thought, The Better Angels of Our Nature is fantastic. This one seems odd, but it's about writing, sense of style, etc. So quite a lot of books by Steven Pinker. And he's a member of the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists. It's kind of... sounds
I just love
frivolous.
that that's in there.
Pardon?
I just love that that's in there.
That's my Wikipedia, yeah.
Wiki.
Americans do have a sense of humor. Remember where I worked in Berlin, you know. Okay, so Pinker argues that our brain is totally physical. But how many of you feel like, okay, this is a great sketch. In fact, I could ask you the question. This could be the quiz question for today. Do you remember Star Trek? The TV series or the movies? They still have them, right? There's new movies out all the time. One of the things that they use as an interesting device to save time, plot device, is the transporter, right? You get into this thing, they go, Scotty, beam me up, is the line, right? You know, and you're gone from here and you're on the set of the Crazy Planet with the same rocks as the TV series, right? Yeah. And then when it's time for you to go back, they beam me up, and you're back, right? And they actually figured out kind of a scientific basis for how this device might work. If you get in the device, it's not sending you someplace. It's disappearing you entirely. So all your atoms are just gone, and then a perfect copy shows up at the other place. Right? That's the way it's supposed to work, right? So it's not like you're being somehow mysteriously sent there. The you that arrives on Mars or wherever is a copy of the original that is no longer in existence. Right? So, here's the question. If you had the opportunity to travel via transporter, would you?
By the
That's
first.
where?
By the first.
Well, you could say we did monkeys, we did oranges, I know Malfoy does a bird, but that's a different kind of weird device. I don't know how that one works. But no, theoretically, you get into this device. We could send other things to test it and so on. Monkeys can be sent back, they seem to be the same monkey. So you could get in it and be sent. Yeah, you'd be the first because we actually haven't had this machine, right? Don't have it. But, so would you do it? Would you get into this device, this
Was the monkey tested for things like memory perception?
Sure.
They test well?
Yeah, they looks like exactly the same monkey.
Yeah,
So you would go.
sure.
Not worried that your soul might not go with you? That's the question, right? Because if the soul is not material, not part of your body. And this teletransporter just sends a perfect copy of you. I mean, the soul, if there is something that's not physical, so what's arriving at the other spot is just a physical copy of you. So what about your soul?
Well, wouldn't your soul die with that original destruction of the first one, and the second one would have a new soul?
I would think so. That wouldn't be the same soul, would it?
No, it'd be a different soul.
But that's
Why?
also saying that a soul would be able to manifest in a copy rather than an original.
Yeah, where would the soul come from?
It's like cloning.
Well, the,
Wait, so when you come back, you're a third copy, is what they're saying?
When you return?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Oh.
The original's gone forever.
Yeah, and isn't there a movie where he ends up like with 6 copies of himself, and each
The
one
sixth day.
deteriorates? It's like,
Multiplicity.
what's it called?
Oh, I was thinking of the multiplicity.
Yes.
Keaton, they just get worse and worse.
Yeah. That's kind of an interesting. I mean, theoretically, this device is supposed to send an exact copy of what disappears at the one site arrives at the other one. I know Dr. McCoy Bones absolutely hates the device because he's worried about his atoms being splattered all over the universe, which is just hilarious because, no, that's not how it works, Dr. McCoy. Your atoms aren't sent anyplace. It's just another perfect copy, being made over here. So in a sense, you could have a saved copy on a floppy. Well, we don't have floppies anymore. Flash drive. I have to update this, right? You'd have a saved copy of yourself on the flash drive. In case something happens to that one, you can have yourself returned, just the way you were. But now we get into legal problems. As you can imagine, the lawyers getting involved in this, right? Especially because what if my wife likes the copy, and doesn't want me to come back, so she basically has me destroyed out there, but she keeps the copy. You can see where there would be plots you could, construct for interesting movies.
So you're proposing that your personality changes every time you transport?
It could, because the personality is a physical manifestation. There we go.
Why isn't it? Why isn't your personality made up based off the millions of intricate
The neurons and
imperfections
things
of
in your
your
brain.
brain and your other body chemistry?
That's
Why
true.
why do we assume consciousness and personality is a separate organization and not?
It may not be the same thing as a soul.
And they're not codependent on
Yeah.
each other?
Yeah.
Where you can imagine, so say I go to Mars, but we keep the backup copy here, right? If something happens to me there, maybe I'm like killed or something, they can just bring me back with the copy. Or, if I have some horrible experience, where I find myself, out in the vacuum or something and my eyeballs are like being sucked out of my head and
But will the
Sorry.
copy still have the memory of when you were there, because it was made?
no, it won't any of the things that happened to me there, the copy is the exact same individual that originally left there. So everything that happened in Mars after I got there,
Right.
especially me
But
arriving in a dress,
Theoretically,
whatever.
you could send
Yeah,
two
none of that
copies
happened.
to two different places at the same time.
You can have multiple copies of yourself. Yeah.
Well,
I
they
don't
could
think
bring
they're-
back my original, and there's really no losing and trying it. Like, if you can say, like, yeah, we have a copy of you right here, and we'll just reboot it.
Unless you believe your consciousness is not tied to your physicality.
Has Black Mirror done this episode yet? 'Cause I think they should.
I'm so
What
lost.
did that one woman mean at the march? She had a sign at the Women's March the other day. She had a sign that said, "This."
It's the worst episode of Black Mirror ever.
Yes. What did that?
I don't
That was
remember.
like. Phew, I missed. You have to know the show to know that this is like reality is like the worst episode. Is
This seems like an episode that would be on that show.
that? Well, the reason this is this is like the Scotty beam me up question, right? The reason it might make us nervous is because if we think of the soul as the real part of us, and it's not the physical body, then this transporting our body leaves the soul unattached, right? And that's where we might be worried about, you know. It's different if you're sending in, you know, a bag of oranges, great, right? As long as the energy use in this kind of a device. By the way, they're actually doing teletransporting more and more things. So far, I think it's just information that they're sent. But the very first test I remember reading about years ago was they transported a portion of Mozart's 40th symphony. It doesn't have 42 symphonies, right? It's the 40th symphony. They sent a portion of it through an impenetrable barrier, and by the way, discovered that it got there 7 times faster than the speed of light. And the way this works is when it's quantum entanglement, right? So basically, if you entangle 2 particles and you send one to one place and one to the other, they're now entangled. So anything that happens to this one immediately responds to this one. So if you have, you know, sets of particles that are entangled at both places, and you basically take this apart, it's there, right? So, and the newest thing that I've heard about them is they're using them for computers for sending data from one computer to another to create a quantum computer so that they're faster. You know that, what is it, Moore's Law, right? Where every 18 months the computer is supposed to double in capacity. You know, it's gotten to the point where it's like, oh crap, there's no way for us to double them anymore. That's all kind of finished. And then they came up with still more things that they can make them even faster. So, but that's pretty weird stuff. But if we're talking about the nature of the soul, did we talk about this yet? What is the soul? Do you have a soul? How many of you feel like you have a soul?
I believe so.
I don't know.
And is it physical, part of your body?
I don't
I
think
don't think so.
so. I don't think so.
You agree that you have a soul and it's not physical. So where does this come from? This argument. Well, this is the
There's a
text
lot
where
of
this begins.
Oh, that's what, I thought you were asking me.
Well, I mean, what Plato has Socrates argue here. Now, and at this point now, we're not sure that this is something Socrates really argued for or not. But this is part of Plato's philosophy now, right? Whether it was Socrates that he got it from, or he's basically trying to answer the questions that Socrates posed for him. And what he argues is that the soul has no parts. And when you build something, what you're doing is you're putting parts together. Now, if we break it, we like take part of it away, and now it doesn't function. You know, we destroy it, we take the parts apart, or whatever, right? So making something or destroying it has to do with the parts and their arrangement. But if the soul doesn't have any parts, you can't make one, nor can you destroy one. They're eternal. And so the concept of the soul that we get through Plato is that you have an eternal soul. And by the way, this ties into a reincarnation motif. So if we go further east and we look at like the Buddhist theory, Hindu, maybe, I'm not that interested, I don't do that much with Hinduism, but if you think of, at least of Buddhism, the idea there is that you follow the Eightfold Path so that you're an ascetic, you're not attached to the physical universe, so that by the time you die, your soul is completely, unattached. And so you escape having to come back into the meat, reincarnation, right? Back into a meat, chili con carne, right back to the meat. You know, so if your soul gets back into a body, right? You're reincarnated, and Plato seems to have thought that there was, and by the way, Pythagoras also. So there's perhaps a linkage. Does this come from India, or are they influencing one another at this point? When you look at the Christian concept of the soul, there's going to be a difference, and that is that the soul is created and then can't die, right? And that's when does the soul become there? Usually they'll argue early, at least, that it's there at the first motion. So when the the first foot kicks, that's when the soul, the fetus is ensouled. It's now got a soul because it moves, right? It's not my fault. I'm just trying to explain my understanding of how this works, right? And that's usually around 3 months. Is that about right? I'm sure with devices now we can say, hey, look, it's doing all sorts. It's playing chess. It's playing tic-tac-toe. What do you do when you're bored in in a room with a womb with a view, right? Right? Because you're learning rose is my favorite color. Makes me relax. Which is why all of our buildings are rose and green now. You notice? Government buildings, they make the colors rose and green because those are psychologically supposed to make us, I like it. It's not my fault. It's just making the town boring because they're all rose and green, rose and green, rose and green. Okay, so where do we get the idea, though, that anything could exist that has no parts? This is in am I in the right place? No, I don't want that. I want the actual elements. What? Dagnabbit. Sorry. So there you go. So this is geometry, right? A point is that which has no part. A line is a series of points, or a breathless length. The ends of a line are points, etc. Right? So this is after Plato, but if you think about it, this is exactly what he's saying our soul consists of. So it's invisible. Not subject to destruction. Now, Steven Pinker will laugh at this and say, no, that's just dumb. Even David Foster Wallace has a great line in his book on infinity where he refers to the brain as electrified pate. Maybe you don't like that line. When I read that, I went, electrified pate? Oh, that's too cool to forget, right? Electrified pate. But Plato thinks that the soul is eternal, and the argument is that it can't be destroyed. Now, how can it be constructed? I don't know that the Christian theologians ever give us an explanation of how that can happen when they do that. But so, this is why when Plato's body, or rather Socrates' body, is going to be destroyed, he's not 100% worried because he thinks his soul is going to go on. In fact, he gives us an interesting story, which is based on a kind of a Greek myth, that at death, the soul gets to a place where you could go to the left or to the right, right? And, you know, get your choice where you're going to go. And Socrates is hoping that he's going to get to go and spend time with all these brilliant people whose souls are all sitting around discussing justice and love and fellowship and all this other stuff. And so he's going to have a good time. But you guys are going to suffer because you won't have me around like a horsefly biting you on the back end of the horse, you know, whenever you're doing something stupid, right? That's his kind of interesting argument. Now, so remember this, because this comes up a lot. This is math. So you get, you know, this is actually still number theory today. We talk about the number line. That's why we have all the trouble we have with the infinite, right? Because if it takes up no space, right? Right. How many of them do you have from here to here? Doesn't take up any space, so that you have an infinite number of them right here, right? And if I have this space, right, this is an infinite number too, right? Yes? Have you ever thought about this? So this is Zeno. If we go back to Zeno and his paradoxes. We have a particular, I guess this is, so you keep having the distance, having the distance, having the distance, but you essentially keep doing that so that there's actually no point here. You can never actually get here. So it's just one of those mind-boggling things. But when we think of the soul, if we think of the soul as having no parts, where is it? Where is it? The medieval theologians think of your soul as slightly larger than your body. Right? So that, and the reason for that is because you can sense when someone's like behind you, right? So how do you account for that? You don't have eyes back there, but you have a sense that there's something there. You could feel stuff in the air around you, right? Today we know we can take pictures of that, and we know that you have like a heat signature around you, an energy around you. The medieval artists tried to depict that. So some of these are pretty silly, but they've got this circular thing sitting on top of their head. Here's a knight, I guess, with right. You've seen these, right?
Don't they call those a chakra? I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there's like 7 different.
That's an Indian, yeah, the different energy sources that you have to be concerned about in the body are chakras, yes. Interesting. This I didn't really search for this very well because I'm not getting the kind of thing.
So what are the halos meant to like?
Did I spell it wrong? There, so here we go. So the halo is meant to depict your soul. Which they believed was larger than your body. And colorful. And the color would actually represent your mood or how good you were, right? So gold, obviously, being a rare metal, would depict excellence, near divinity practically, right? And your soul. I don't know why then they gave her a bunch of frilly leaves or something. That's kind of terrible for her. But that's a really ugly picture of her anyway.
That's probably why they put the frilly leaves up there.
That's like, oh, would you want to kiss that? No. Sorry, is that wrong? I should really think about what I'm going to say before I say it, just in case. That could be just bad. I'm going out to play, Mom. I don't know. Doesn't work. But yeah, so, and the thing is, from what I understand, they didn't have a way of doing this, but they're not thinking in terms of it just being like a flat disc behind your head, but it's like a globe around you. But they didn't have a way of depicting that. But it is interesting that today we have cameras that can view an individual and discover that you have like a heat signature like around you, and some people can see that still today, right?
I met someone who told me that I had a green aura, is what she said. She's like, it's so vivid, I saw you as soon as I came through, blah, blah, blah. I was
Yeah.
like,
My wife does this sort of thing. It's really quite scary, because
Her office had a certain green scent to it also.
What's green mean? It's mean good? She said it was good. She said it was rare. But I don't know, maybe your wife should look at me and we'll see what color your wife says I am. Or
well,
if she sees
what my wife notices, like we went to the symphony one time, we're sitting way up, because we sit at the door closest to the woman's bathroom, because that's my wife's entrance. I told you this already?
No, I'm just saying you don't need to.
Oh, okay, but, so that's where we have subscriber seats for, like, right there, so we could go right out. But the one time we were sitting there, one of the violinists came out and sat down, and Donna said, oh my goodness, he's gray. What do you mean he's gray? He looks gray. And he looked perfectly natural to me. But she said, well, when I see someone that looks gray, that means they're going to die soon. And it's like, ooh, Well, sure enough, by the next symphony, he was dead. So, I'm on my best behavior when I'm around my wife. That's important, because you want to live. I don't know what made him great. And one of my daughters, and we couldn't figure out how to make children, so all of our kids are adopted. So there's no genetic thing. Pardon?
Nothing, sorry.
Oh, well, but one of my daughters has synesthesia, so she can see colors when she hears a noise. She also sees colors associated with, I don't know.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Some people really have, and here's the thing, this is not like there's something wrong with these people. They're actually people that have an ability that we lack.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing really real stuff somehow. So that's pretty interesting.
They're adapting that for people who are blind. No, for people who can't see color. They're starting to make these little cameras that they can have like put in their skull basically that will play notes based on what color they're looking at.
That's pretty cool.
So I heard an interview and the guy was like, Justin Bieber sings in pink because whatever, I don't know, pitch he sings in is the Pink's associated thing. So they like reversed it.
Maybe that's why I don't like him. No, pink is a good color. But, shoot, where was I going with this? But so the medieval people had individuals just like we do that could see this stuff, and I guess they thought it was the soul, and so they're depicting it in some kind of symbolic rendition of this. But when we think in terms of the argument today, Steven Pinker's on one side of the issue, but my favorite folks are on the other side, and that's Stewart. This is, I think, the clearest one.
like bits, or neuronal firings are like bits. You get complicated enough computation, and consciousness emerges as a novel property at some high level. The problem with that approach is that there's no specified threshold. You know, they don't say X number of neurons doing this sort of computation, or why that would happen. We have many complex computers that aren't conscious. We have many things that are complex in the universe that aren't consciousness. So computation and complexity per se are not the answer.
So I'm going to come back to that thought again a little bit later, but I just want to lay the foundation for our audience who may not be as versed in neuroscience as you. So let me just ask you this. I know you have an operation after this interview. So let's say you put your patient asleep, and after the operation is over, you wake them up. How do you know that they're not a zombie? How do you know that they're conscious? How do you know that you restored their original state they were in when they came into the operation room today?
Well, before the operation, I can't say for sure they're conscious for the reasons I said before. So at the end, if their behavior is the same and they recognize themselves and us and their family and everything and are acting the same, I have to assume that they are. I think there's an interesting phenomenon when patients are first waking up from anesthesia. They're awake, they're alert, they seem to be awake, they're looking around, they're breathing, they respond to command. They may not be conscious yet. There may be a phase where they're having behavior, but they're not conscious. They could be temporarily in a zombie phase. I think that may happen on emergence from consciousness, and other people in anesthesia think that too.
Very interesting. So let me ask you this then. Is understanding anesthesia the route to understanding what consciousness is, perhaps?
I think it's a very good route. I think it may be one of the best, if not the best, combined with other techniques. And this study goes back about 150 years. Claude Bernard showed that amoeba, a slime mold amoeba that crawl along, if you expose them to anesthesia, they stop moving. And he showed that happened in the cytoplasm, in the cell interior. Later, at the turn of the 20th century, Meyer and Overton in England and Germany showed that the potency of a whole bunch of gases, which are anesthetic, different concentrations, correlate over many orders of magnitude with their solubility in a lipid-like environment. It's something like olive oil or benzene or phenyl rings. And because neuronal membranes are mostly lipid, people thought for many years that anesthetics acted lipid membranes, and that's what they did. They prevented membrane function that caused consciousness to stop. However, it turns out that anesthetics act on proteins. So then the assumption was membrane proteins, receptors for GABA-A, nicotinic acetylcholine, serotonin, glycine, etc. But there's no real evidence that they do that in terms of different anesthetics having different potency effects. For example, if we take, there's three vaporizers over there, blue, purple, and yellow. We'll show you that later, and they have different potencies. So what you want to do is have a model system where, let's say, the purple one is twice as potent as
benchmarks like Deep Blue defeating Kasparov in chess, perhaps
that's not consciousness.
Watson defeating Ken Jennings in Jeopardy.
Okay, so I'll just leave it at that. So it's on the internet. You're welcome to look up Stuart Hameroff, another colleague of his, totally different profession. He's an anesthesiologist, I guess you got from this, and has done thousands of operations, so that's what got him interested in consciousness, and now he's spending most of his time trying to investigate the nature of consciousness. And Roger Penrose is the other one. You might remember Roger Penrose from being the co-author with Stephen Hawking in A Brief History of Time. He's also got lots of other books, and some on consciousness. The Large, the Small, and the Human Mind is one of his little books that talks about this. And their thesis is that our consciousness is at the quantum level, that it's not like Steven Pinker thinks in the interaction of the various neurons. It could be part of that, but it's not only that. So what he's talking about, in order to successfully anesthetize a patient so that they're not feeling pain or waking up during the operation, you have to anesthetize the quantum level characteristics in our brains, not just the neurons, right? So that that's pretty much what he's getting into. So his he's convinced that our consciousness is in the microtubules, which are in the neurons, and they're quantum particles in the microtubules that are the kinds of things that we can think about in these teleporters, and the idea that you're sending your information. Because the particles that we have that make up everything else are energy in an arrangement, and they're not even the same energy in the same, the arrangement persists, although they do change, right? So as we're breathing and talking and thinking, we are experiencing change, right? But the energy is actually going in and out of existence. So it's not even the same energy that makes that arrangement, right? And so when we're at this level, we don't have substance. We actually have energy, and energy, by the way, is the new version of spirit, right? So when we see Einstein talking about mass and energy, that's where we're no longer talking about body and mind, or matter and spirit. Now we talk about mass and energy, but mass is actually energy in an arrangement. So it's actually everything is energy, which Plato is going to argue is what everything is spirit, in a sense, right? So what I'd like to basically suggest is that we've got two sides of this issue. It's, in a sense, still the same issue. Is it mind or in a physical sense, or is it spirit? And of course, I like the spirit side of it. And it seems like these guys are the ones that make the most sense to me. But who knows where that's going to go? But so this issue is still there. So Plato seems to introduce it. Again, I'm not sure what the relationship is with the Indian subcontinent and the philosophy there. We have books on that stuff. I confess I've just never read them. I checked it out at the library once and never got very far because I was busy reading other things. But that would certainly be interesting. Okay, so this is the source of our argument that the soul is eternal, that it's not made of parts, so it can't be destroyed. And in a sense, since it's energy in an arrangement, good question. Can you destroy the arrangement? Probably only on a macro level, not on a micro level, so I don't know.
Well, that's the same as the laws of thermodynamics. Energy can't be destroyed, it can be manipulated, it can be reformed.
Right. So I think that's interesting. Just kind of pass that interest on to other folks. Okay, so gave you 2 quiz questions, right, for today. So when we're looking next class, we're going to be looking at the Meno and the Symposium and the Republic. So we're looking at Plato's philosophy. This is clearly not Socrates. Well, as far as I can guess, Socrates is not the one that comes up with all these answers to Socrates' own questions. So this is Plato's philosophy. He's still using Socrates as his mouthpiece, but the dialogues are not real Socrates. They're instead Plato. And this is the part where they really get boring for the most part, because now instead of a dialogue, you instead have people asking Plato questions, and I mean Socrates questions, and Socrates answers them ad nauseum, you know. So it's like, yes, Socrates, wow, that's really wonderful, Socrates. Oh, and so what do you mean by this, Socrates? Oh, thank you, that's great, Socrates. You know, so it's no longer this nasty, brutal, question and answer that just is absolutely amazing. Instead, you just get Plato's philosophy being described by Socrates. And so we start off in the Meno with the theory of knowledge. The topic is virtue, but Meno is, I looked it up, and nano looks like it means unchanging. So it suggests to me that the question, can virtue be taught? The answer is no. Which ties in to the Republic, as we'll see, where basically in Plato's psychology, everybody has at birth a character. That you're going to be this way. And no matter what education or whatever you get, not going to change you. You're going to be set. You've got a certain type of character. And whether you're virtuous or not isn't going to be something that we could really improve upon because it's part of your character. I don't know if you're a parent that has a child that, this child is good, this child is nasty all the time. If you get that sense that individuals have their own character from the get-go, and they just get more of it as they grow. Cool. So that's where we'll head, talking about Plato's philosophy next. Is this fun? How am I doing? Okay, that's an okay thing.
Does Socrates have any of his own writings that he did, or is it all just him through
Nope.
Plato?
Nope. Kind of like Jesus. As far as we know, the only writing Jesus did was sitting on the dirt, as he was apparently writing the sins of the folks that realized, oh, you've heard that joke, right? They were all gathered around getting ready to stone this woman to death. And Jesus arrived and saw what was going on, and he said, what's going on? And they said, well, she's committed adultery, so we're going to stone her to death. And Jesus started writing on the ground, and apparently he was writing the sins of all the people that were getting ready to stone her to death. And as they saw what he was writing, they dropped their stones and left until there was no one left except this one big heavy-set woman who came over, picked up a great big rock, and went up and went splat, killed the woman instantly. Jesus looked up at the woman with tears in his eyes. Didn't expect that of you, Mom. It's a really bad joke. And a Roman Catholic joke. See, because she was born without sin. She's the Immaculate Conception. By the way, that's a weird a Catholic thing. The Immaculate Conception was Mary. And it doesn't have anything to do with her conceiving Jesus. She was born without original sin. It's a miracle. That was so that she would be a fitting vessel for Jesus, right? So that's a bad joke. But it wakes you up so that now that you're going to have to drive home, that bad joke will keep you awake, I hope.
What was the second question again?
Oh, the second question was, will you get into the transporter and willingly be sent to Mars? Or
We have to answer with all the, when he was tested first, and we just leave it at the transporter.
what
to
if,
just-
well, I'm asking
Kinda like
questions
Star
that
Trek,
I'm,
so,
well, I'm asking questions that are hopefully interesting enough that you'll send me.
just take off with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because the more you write, the better it is for you. The more you think about the vocabulary, the better you learn the vocabulary, etc. Right? So.
And the dates in there for the tests and the syllabus, those are correct now, right?
I think so. Yes.
I'm just asking,
Yeah. The one that was wrong that I had to flip was the final.
oh,
'Cause I had, well, actually, that wouldn't have been wrong for this class because we only meet Friday nights. So. Because I apologize for having the class on a Friday night, but it's not really up to me. They say, would you like to teach this on a Friday night? And I say, yes, please. Because they didn't say or something else. It was like, here's a class on Friday night. Would you like to do this? And I mean, what am I'm going to be sitting home reading anyway. It's not going to, or being on my Oculus Rift. That's visit places.
would we go in?
Due date for the quizzes? I wrote you today, but I wasn't sure if that was okay or not.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, usually, I'm just thinking, before we discuss
this.
the quiz, you know,
Okay.
so that you've already sent me your response, and then I
Okay.
can,
So doing it the day, today was fine.
yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then, is there a certain amount you're wanting us to write, or just?
Well, no, I'm mostly just, at the end of the semester, I'll look and see how many emails you sent me, roughly the same as others.
So should I send quiz 1, quiz 2 separately, because today I sent it in the same email?
Well, because it's one night, and one email.
Okay,
is
one
fine.
night's fine, okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good, thank you.
Your responses will be on the board.
Have a good weekend, thanks.
Oh, that's cool too, yes. Good night, drive safely.
I don't agree with what they say, how they send out on the telephone.
Oh, how it worked?
Copies, no, they're not copies.
You think that what they were saying is your
They
physical
took
body was
your
rematerialized on the other side?
And basically scan, like a scan, and moved the original to a new spot. And brought the original back. Because that would be weird, if your life is nothing but one copy after another copy.
Well, the thing is when, they use quantum tunneling, which is what this is called, to send information or anything. What constructs the thing that arrives on the other side are the particles that are already there. And the particles that are here are no longer. And you can do this over incredible distances, and it's faster than, it's instantaneous.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you were actually sending the particles, they would have to get there.
Well,
And that's not,
I understand how the particles work, but instead of a copy, it's still the original. Because your atoms that you're made of are constantly changing and moving. All they're doing is accelerating that process.
so, yeah, so you're saying that because of that quantum tunneling effect, the copy, are the particles that are arranged over there are in effect the same.
The same. They perform the same, they do the same thing. They're not like a photocopy. You know?
Right, well, yeah, it's not like a photocopy, it's like
You know.
another John
Yeah, only
that shows up over there.
you were here, now you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of like that. Of course, in the TV show, it takes a little bit, a few seconds for them to do that, change the scene. And then that's,
And sometimes you end up with